Hi, everybody. It's Aunt Suzie with my fabulous sex cast. And what a fun show we have lined up. Actually, what a fun month we have lined up as we get ready to celebrate Pride Month at Suzie's Retail. That's right. I am so excited. And today, of course, my gorgeous little producer, Ashlen Barry. How are you, Ashlen?
I'm great. Happy Pride, Aunt Suzie.
Happy Pride to you. Oh, and we have a special guest that's going to join us today. A dear friend of mine, Frank Hagan, that I've known for a long time. And Frank will be coming on soon, and he's gonna play with us as we talk about LGBTQ history. You know, there's more to the LGBTQ history than just Stonewall, because a lot happened way before then. But before the wait a minute, hold on. Oh, you know what? I think I see somebody at the door. Hold on. Oh my God, it's Frank Hagan. Hey Frank, how are you?
Hello, Aunt Suzie. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Frank, I want you to meet the lovely Ashlen Barry. She's our little producer here, and she keeps me going on the air and stuff. And I just love her to death. And we're gonna educate her today on LGBTQ history.
She's so petite and so young. Well, compared to you, anybody would look young.
Oh, thank you so much. I told you, Ashlen, we're old friends. I swear.
I'm ready to learn.
I know. Now, Frank and I have worked before on some other projects that were way ahead of his time, part of LGBTQ history. But Frank has produced with Donahue, with Oprah. He produces reality shows. And it hit me at the last minute. I thought to myself, you know what? Today I am just going to let Frank join us because, he's a little bit older than I am. And I figured he would be able to fill in some of the blanks that I can't. So, Ashlen, here we are, LGBTQ history. What is it that you want to know more about? Do you want to know more about the what's happened in the United States with the Stonewall riots and why that happened? Or hit us up. We're ready. We're here to answer questions with you.
Yeah. So, I'm super excited to have you guys on. We hear a lot about Stonewall. I think a lot of people are very familiar with figures like Marsha P. Johnson, Harvey Milk, but I know there was a lot more people involved than just the really popular ones. Mm-hmm. So do you guys have any stories of LGBTQ/queer people who really made an impact on you in the movement, or an impact on the movement that you think is kind of overlooked?
Frank?
Well, it depends what era.
Right.
I mean, there were people that were striding forward without people even knowing.
Right.
And you can go back into Hollywood. Hollywood's a great place to look at. And if you go back to the early days when Hollywood was just taking off and Valentino and crew were doing what they were doing, there were people like Ramon Navarro, who was as gay as could be, and managed to become a heartthrob. Really? Michael, I'm getting a little feedback.
Okay, you need to turn your sound down, Frank. I believe.
All right.
You should need to turn your sound down. You're on your phone?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you sound perfect to us. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you sound perfect to us. We forgot to go through that just a few minutes ago. Sorry. I'm old. I can get away with it. Yes, there were. Well, go ahead.
What I was trying to say is, there were strides made by people in quiet ways before Stonewall, in little indistinct ways that it's like and I'm trying to remember his name right now, and I can't. But it was a silent screen actor that was kind of traded out.
Not Rudolph Valentino.
It passed Valentino, but he was still a major star.
Right.
But he was also a brilliant decorator. And when he lost his ability to perform because of what Hollywood did to him, he became a top designer and decorator in town for some 40 or 50 years. And eventually he ended up decorating the White House for Nancy Reagan.
Mm-hmm. Really?
I remember
And they
that
used to
from
call him and
watching
his
the new.
boyfriend the happiest couple in America. I'm sorry, what?
What was that?
Oh, I was just saying. I watched the new Ryan Murphy series Hollywood, and I think he's in that. The person you're speaking of, who's a decorator.
Yeah.
Well,
But he was a real person. He wasn't one of the fake ones that they had created.
I know they created a
Right.
lot. Did you watch it, Ashlen? That show where they made Rock Hudson stupid. He was.
I did watch it.
Oh my gosh. Hush, Frank. But no, a lot of people have questions about, it's like, for instance, what was that movie? The Birdcage. Remember when they were eating China? They were having the dinner, and the parents came over, and the China had the little boys screwing on the China, but it was China it was dated back to like, BC.
It was Greek.
Before what?
It was Greek design dishes.
Right. William Haynes.
And they were quote unquote playing William Haynes. Yes.
Yes.
Bill Haynes and his lover were considered the happiest married couple in Hollywood.
Really?
They were together 40 something years. Yeah.
Wow.
And Haynes furniture, by the way, the stuff that he designed is now a prized possession if you can get a hold of it.
Yes, he was the first openly gay film star, according to Patrick Byrne.
Technically.
Patrick Byrne just is listening to the show, and he wrote that in there. Pretty cool. Ashlen, come on, girl. This is your time to ask us questions.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, so during Stonewall, that happened in New York. What was happening on the West Coast at the same time?
I was actually in the New York suburbs at the time, so there wasn't a whole lot happening here in Los Angeles, from what I have been told.
And what years
they picked up on it a few days later?
Right. What years were this? What years are we talking?
1969, June.
1969. Yeah, which was June 28th, 1969 is when the riots happened. That's when.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh because it took all these years for drag queens to get recognition, because they were always cast, until the other to the side, because there's so much elitism in the gay community. Actually, it really is amazing. There's a lot of
but it was a drag queen that threw the first punch.
It was a drag queen that threw the first punch. Drag queen started the modern LGBTQ movement. Did you know that?
Yeah. I did know that, actually. I am a huge fan of drag, and I've watched a lot of documentaries about like the underground scene before, way before Drag Race or anything, but like in the 60s and 70s, the kind of underground, the pageant scene and the ballroom scene. Did you guys ever experience anything like that or see any of that in person?
Well,
I did in New York in the time in the mid-90s.
In the midnight. Well, I've been around a long time, but I remember in the 70s going to a place called the Q in downtown Norfolk, and it was and back in the old days, Ashlen, all of the gay bars and gay clubs were always in the seediest part of town. So not only were you afraid to get your ass kicked, you were afraid to get your ass kicked because that was in the am I right, Frank? It was always seedy. And because
usually in the smaller cities outside of the major metropolitan areas, you're 100% correct.
Right. And actually, Patrick Byrne just, by the way, corrected us. He said Kansas City actually preceded Stonewall with the Phoenix Society. I did not know that.
Oh.
Patrick said we could actually dance together in Kansas City in the early 60s. Wow. But they had a place on Sunset Boulevard. I actually got to Hollywood in 1979. And there was stuff happening way before then. And some of the drag queens that I had met, there was this club. Well, it's where the Comedy Store is today. It was Ciro's. And right after, between Ciro's and the Comedy Store, it was another nightclub. I can't remember the name, but it was a drag club. Did you know that, Frank?
No.
Yes. And that's Charles Pierce performed there. So many. And it was like hidden. And of course they had a thing with the mob at the time. So it never got closed down. And, so that was something that was different. And during my time coming out as a gay guy, 1979, what happened to me, Ashlen, when you're asking about were there significant people that turned my life around? I always knew I was gay. I always knew there was something different. I'd go out with girls and I'd like their little brother better, and what happened was, I had, when I moved to California, I realized one Sunday, everybody said, you got to go to West Hollywood. You got to go to West Hollywood. In 1979, West Hollywood, it was kick ass. And I remember the first day I was a Sunday and I drove down because I was living in Beverly Hills with this actress, singer, Rosemary Clooney. I was staying at her house for the first couple of months that I lived in LA. And I said, I'm going to West Hollywood. Okay. So I went, and I remember driving down Santa Monica Boulevard on a Sunday afternoon, and they have what was called a beer bust at this place called the Motherlode. It's still there. But the line went from the front door all the way down the block and around the block of people going in to get to have drinks. And it was all the most beautiful men. And back in 79, it wasn't as free as it was, as it is today. People still
had police raids.
You still had police raids and people still popped in. And I just remember going, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And I remember getting out of my car and standing in line. And that day changed my life forever because I went, I am not, growing up in that era, it's a lot different for young kids today because they grow up, they're gay, they're open, they're trans, they're whatever. And they can be whoever they want to be now. But back then it was a secret. You couldn't talk about it, but everybody knew about it. You know what I mean? It's like the major stars that we all knew, but I remember going in and meeting and just experiencing this whole new world. And it's something that I wrote about the other day on Facebook. And I said, it's when I decided, you know what? I'm never going to be a leading man. I'm going to do characters. I'm going to create these characters and I'm going to be a comedian. And from that day, from 1980 on, I decided to live my life as an openly gay man. I didn't walk around with a big triangle on my head going, hi, everybody, I'm gay. I just didn't keep it a secret. And it hasn't affected my career ever since. So that's what started it then. And then the people that I met along the way, which we'll get into. Now, Frank, you were one of the people that was involved with the Reagan administration. Am I correct?
Believe it or not, yes. I was a media coordinator for the Presidential Commission on HIV Epidemic, which was the infamous Reagan's AIDS Commission.
Right.
And it was a very interesting time to be a part of that because smack in the middle of the AIDS crisis, smack in the middle of the people with ACT UP coming after us. I was personally protested in 2 cities, which I found fascinating. And I was basically the one person that was in there to try to go, that doesn't really work and you're not doing it right. And they listened. And there was a big group of people there. But I had a chance to have my input. And I learned something that day. And I said this once to a person out in the front protesting. And I said, you can accomplish more with whispers and the right amount of whispering into the right person's ear than you can with hours of shouting.
Wow.
And that's what I'm doing. And
that's so awesome.
So they kind of left me. I'm sorry?
She said
I just said that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it was interesting working for the United States government at a time where, even if it was Reagan, it still was a prestigious thing to be working at the White House. And I'm very proud of those days. And even though it was like an awful time with now historically ridiculous president that didn't use the term AIDS 3 times in this entire run at the White House.
Right.
But, the story goes back to Nancy Reagan again. It was because she got nervous that all of their friends, the people that they knew and loved, there was Terry Dolan, who was the head of the conservative Republican Party. He had died of AIDS. Rock Hudson and the whole kiss, the notorious kiss
on Dynasty
that took place at a White House event. And then he died.
What?
And then
a kiss at the White House? Oh, because he kissed Nancy Reagan.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. And then Roy Cohn,
Ugh,
who's hopefully in hell having pineapples shut up his butt by somebody.
well, he's
But
evil. He was evil.
the three of those people died. And then the thing that really panicked Nancy was her hairdresser got it. A
Right.
guy by the name of Robin Weir, who was over on P Street. And when he got sick, she dropped it, but she was in a panic mode that everybody was going to get AIDS. You have to do something about it, Ronnie. And he did.
Because it hit home. It's sort of like what happens still today. The ultra conservative Bible thumping idiots. Until it comes into their front door, they don't give a shit. But
Exactly.
I talk to so many young kids today who they have lots of questions, and they ask about what was it like during the 80s and that whole situation. And it wasn't, how do I describe it? I just remember in 1 month I lost 70 people that I knew. You would see them on a Monday.
Oh,
you would see them on a Monday, Ashlen. You'd have dinner with somebody on Monday, they'd be dead by Saturday. And it was just devastating. And so what is it? Is it the Something Heart? What was that movie? The Something Heart.
Normal Heart.
The Normal Heart. I tell everybody they should watch that. They should watch that. It was very, 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 it was very, very, they portrayed what happened to the gay community back then to people.
Yeah. And we just lost Larry Kramer.
Yeah. That was last week, right? Last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a lot has happened since then, as far as history, but there were so many people who some are still with us and many have passed on, but they were the movers and shakers that have allowed these young people to have a freer life and to live, as themselves, whether it be they're gay, they're lesbians, they're trans, it's open, it's open because of history, the LGBTQ history, the folks in the past who forged open the doors,
We were making strides in the 70s and moving forward. I mean, when the Continental Baths became the cool place in town to be, and a star performer ended up on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Bette Midler.
Yep.
And Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow played. Yeah. Did you know that, Ashlen? Bette Midler started off she didn't start off there, but she would perform in the gay bathhouses in Manhattan. And Barry Manilow was her musical director.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there was a place called the Continental Baths, what they used to call the Tubs.
Right.
And a guy by the name of Don Scotti was their talent coordinator. And it was an amazing place. And you could walk in, and there were New York socialites there, dressed to the nines, to sit around in rickety folding chairs to watch Bette Midler perform by the pool while there were guys in there naked swimming.
And Ashlen, you can actually go on YouTube and type in Bette Midler, the gay bathhouses, and you will. There's actually video of her performing at a swimming pool with gay men. It's very. I mean, you just go, wow.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Right.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Right.
But the kind of strides that we were making in those days, there were TV cameras in there to do stories about Bette Midler, and nobody would bat an eye because it was, that's that gay club up in the West 70s. And that's pretty much how it was all seen. Mm-hmm. And it was the former health club from the Ansonia Hotel. Huh. But then AIDS hit, and it got to the point where nobody would even look at you. They wouldn't shake your hand. They would. It's like today, no kissing, no shaking of hands, and no, don't get near me. Mm-hmm. And these are the same people that 3 years before would have you over for dinner because you were the most enlightened and funny person that they knew, and then you would become ostracized.
Right.
That's so awful.
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
When you mentioned AIDS and how it reacted to everybody, one of the best things that I ever heard was somebody describing what it did to them. And he said to me, it made me afraid to make love.
Oh, I trust me. I remember that whole thing.
Yeah.
It was, and if you had the Kaposi's scar on your face.
Kaposi sarcoma. Yes, those were the
telltale signs.
They look like bruises on your body.
Right. And if you would see people at the bar and they would have it on their arm or their leg or their head or their forehead. And it was like a death sentence, when you saw that back then.
Well, it was.
I mean, well, it was.
It was back in those days.
But it was interesting because the drag community back then. I remember I was telling Ashlen the other day when we were discussing the different shows we wanted to put together for the month, and I was telling her, I was a young buck back in 1980, 81, and I remember going to a dinner party. There was a director named Jonathan Lucas, and Jonathan was more of a choreographer. He choreographed all the Dean Martin shows. So I got invited to watch him make the Dingaling Sisters keep in step. And he did all kinds of crazy shows. And his lover was a guy named Mark Santos, who is no longer with us. But Mark and Jonathan brought me into their home, and they lived in this fabulous home at the top of Franklin, up in the Hollywood Hills there. And I remember one day they invited me to a dinner party. Their friend Draper Lewis. Draper worked with Alan Shapiro and Those Amazing Animals, That's Incredible, all those different shows. And Draper had a dinner party, and they invited me over. And I go into the dinner party. I didn't know who the hell was there, but there were all these older gay men. And I had no idea. And then this older woman with blonde hair, decked out in the most fabulous gown and jewelry. And it was Christine Jurgensen. And she was the date of Charles Pierce. And I'm still learning learning the ropes, as they say in Hollywood. And I remember meeting Charles Pierce, who was so incredible. And he knew that I did impressions. He was so, so kind. And then Christine Jurgensen, who I didn't realize was the first transsexual in the world. Was it the world or the United States? I'm trying to remember that.
The world.
Oh, the world. And I didn't realize, Ashlen, at the time, I'm sitting there with history, this historic person. And she was the sweetest, kindest, nicest woman. And there was another guy at the party, which was the black guy at the end of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. He gave him the ice cream cone, and he was saying what a bitch Joan Crawford was. I mean, such a typical gay dinner party. But, to be a part of that history and not realizing how lucky I was to meet these people and to talk to these people and break bread, it was just one of those things that's kind of like, it's mind-numbing. I could go on about the pool parties at Charles Nelson Riley's house. I adore you. There's so much. But how we doing so far, Ashlen?
Amazing. I mean, I'm learning so much. But yeah, that's amazing that you had dinner with the first outwardly trans woman ever. That's incredible.
Right.
And to think about how far we've come in such a short time. I mean, trans rights, we still have so far to go, but just to think about in that period of time how much progress we've made, that's amazing.
It is. What else would you like to know, young lady? We got tons of stories here. I mean, a lot is, and like I said, through the years, we're still battling for our rights. I mean, we can get married now, but the idiots are trying to take that away. If they could have their way, they would try to get the Supreme Court to bring up the marriage thing again. It's pretty scary. It's pretty scary. This whole thing that has happened in the last.
This is the last stand of the frightened white Republican.
It is. And explain that, Frank. Explain that to Ashlen, because she'll appreciate it.
Well, if the thing that frightens, I think, more than anyone else, and I was around Republicans when they were actually Republicans. This is before Reagan started doing what he did, and then it went on from there. But any moment now, according to the number of Latinos in this country, I'm going to be polite, and within the next decade, Caucasian Americans are going to be one of the minorities. And they don't like that.
Mm-mm.
They don't like the fact that we were built as a melting pot, but it was okay to be a melting pot as long as you were white. And this is why we have a resurgence in nationalism and Nazis and all this other crap because they're scared. They're literally in their bunkers in the woods with 15,000 weapons. But why is it they always run to a bunker, and why is it they worship flags that both of which, the Confederate flag and the swastika, both of them, the last thing that they did with those flags was take them down and then hoist a white one before they gave up. And so that's the only kind of white flag that I like seeing is give up. But I don't want to get too much in politics because this is actually supposed to be a sex talk.
Oh, we'll talk. Well, we're talking
That's
about,
what you promised me.
somebody.
You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to bring up something from the 70s that she may know or may not know.
Okay.
Who was the first gay superstar in porn?
In porn?
Yep.
In porn? Oh, wait a minute. Was it John Holmes?
I mean,
No. John Holmes was straight. I'm talking about
Jeff
the
Stryker?
twink of the decade.
Jeff Stryker was the 80s?
No, Jeff Stryker was the 90s and 80s, late 80s, 90s. Kip Noll.
I've heard. Was he a blonde person?
Yep.
Wow. And what we
He
use?
actually was the first person to ever create lines in gay porn theaters for people to come in to see. They would show the new movie, and he would come there and perform for a couple minutes and then go out. All right?
Right. Well, see, that's another thing, Ashlen, that that is different today than it was back then. We didn't have streaming services. We didn't even have VHS tapes. We had nothing. And the only way to see gay movies and porn was to go to these gay theaters. And
Yep.
and it was basically like a gay pickup place. You'd go in there. It was pretty seedy. I think I went to one or two, but there was like well, right now, what's the one on Santa Monica they have now? It's like a gay name. It used to
Tomcat.
There used to be the Pussycat Theater. There used to be one up off on
The Tomcat.
Yeah, Tomcat. And there was a gay theater on Hollywood Boulevard right before you got to Los Feliz. That was there for years. That's the one I walked into for the first time ever in my life and went, holy crap. I couldn't believe it. But back then, Ashlen, there was no way to see a porn unless you got it in a magazine, which was against the law. If it got sent to you in certain states, you could be arrested for sending porn. And then, and like I said, you couldn't watch it. So that was other ways that the LGBTQ community had to experience, sex and movies and porn and stuff. Now it's like, all you got to do is just click your mouse and you can see anything you want. And,
Yeah.
But I mean, and then, and so like what Frank was saying about Kip Noll, gays would go to the gay theaters and they'd stand in line. It would be long lines to see a porn star. Amazing. At the same time, risking getting arrested. And because the cops would come in and guys would actually meet and do nasty masturbatory things in the theater while they're watching the movie, or they'd hook up in the bathroom, or they'd hook up actually in the seats. It was seedy. It was sleazy, but that was the only way.
Then a little company came along called Falcon.
Mm-hmm. With the advent
of Studios,
which the advent of VHS, correct?
Well, no, they first put out tapes on Sony Betamax,
right?
But Falcon Films, and I think back in the day, if I can't remember which is the name of the company,
mm-hmm.
but also Bob Guccione of Penthouse fame.
Mm-hmm.
They realized it's cheaper to produce it on VHS than it is on Betamax, and the Beta machines were more expensive, but the VHS machines were cheaper. So the porn industry drove the difference between us having VHS tapes and Betamax for porn. And that's how we ended up with that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
Right. And,
I had no idea.
Right. And I mean, and everybody, they would have these in different places. That's what we were talking about with Chi-Chi LaRue a couple of weeks ago. We were talking like the Circus of Books. That was one of the main places where you get the magazines and the DVDs. They didn't have DVDs then. It was VHS tapes.
Yep.
And but that's where everybody would go in West Hollywood. They go there.
Before that, they were mini 8mm reels.
Right. And there was Drake's on Melrose, and she told us the funniest story about Drake's, and the lightning bolt while it was there. That's pretty freaking funny. He put the lightning bolt because his mother said, lightning would strike him dead if he opened up a store like that. And so that's why there was the famous blue lightning bolt over the door of Drake's. Swear to God. Remember that, Ashlen? He was talking about that. But yeah. So I mean, we could go for the entire month talking about different situations, different scenarios. But what happened?
We're just missing the bartender and the martinis, and
right.
and a thing of olives in front of us, because this is the kind of conversation that Michael would have, and we'd sit around and we go, oh my God, I didn't know you knew him. It turns out Michael and I were, out of the 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon, we're probably in there like between a 2 and a 3.
And that's Aunt Suzie, who, I mean, people know for crying out. I'm Suzie. Sure, it's okay. I'm Suzie. I'm Aunt Suzie, but I'm an actor as well. So, I mean, it's not a big thing. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out everything. You know what I mean? But you're right. We have a history and we go back, and there's just so much that has connected us through the years. We had no idea. I mean, how I met Frank, Ashlen, was producing the show, the Paul Lynde Show. Paul Lynde, who was one of the gayest people on television. And I met Frank at the Abbey. In 2004, I think it was 2004 is when I met you. And
I walked in with a mutual friend of ours.
And I was with a mutual friend of mine. And our friend was a producer with, I forget, one of those National Geographic or something like that. But anyway, introduced me to Frank. And I said, I'm doing a show about Paul Lynde. He goes, well, I know the guy that was his agent. And I said, what? And that's how we became friends. And, Paul Lynde is another history of the LGBTQ community. Paul Lynde was so gay, and everybody knew he was gay, but he never said he was gay. I mean, when he did the Hollywood Squares, do you remember? Do you know who I'm talking about, Ashlen? Paul Lynde was.
I do, yeah.
Only because you've been to my house and you've seen the shit.
Well, and go ahead and explain
the sexually ambiguous males of the 80s.
Oh, no. Okay. So what happened? One of the reasons why it's not just Paul Lynde was because I played the voice of the Mirror on The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. There were 2 mirrors. Okay. The first guy, believe it or not, there was a guy who did the Mirror before me, and he got fired because he had child porn and got arrested. And it's like, okay. So I came in and took his place. Isn't that funny? I don't know if I ever told you that, Ashlen. But if you
did,
look,
yeah.
I didn't
but
even
it blew
know
my
that.
mind when you said
Yes.
It blew my mind as a millennial that you said you were on. That was my favorite character in the show growing up. So I was just mind blown.
Right. And when Ashlen and I met, she was more excited. Well, hold on. Frank can tell you the same story. But for those out there listening, I did the voice of Paul Lynde as the Mirror. And so the millennials, like Ashlen, were just blown away. Frank was producing a show in Texas, but he would pass through here. He was here also doing some scouting for something. Remember the kid you brought over to the house who was your production assistant or something?
Yeah, Hunter.
Hunter.
Yeah.
Listen
Hunter
to this,
had never
Ashlen.
been outside of Texas and always wanted to go to Las Vegas. And I said, okay, I'll get you a plane ticket. Meet me there next week, which is exactly what I did. And he did. And we were traveling around town because we were doing stuff with the Sequest, the aquarium thing, and I put him into a tank full of sharks and stingrays, which is very cool, by the way. He's like sitting there looking at me and going, what are you doing to me? And then I brought him over to meet Michael. And he just sat there and he said, I know that voice. And then he found out, and he sat there and he was melting into the chair.
He's your age.
Believe it.
Your age, Ashlen. Grew up with it.
I mean, it's honestly like, I don't know. I grew up in a small town, and like I wanted a friend like the Mirror growing up, and so that was kind of like my friend. So when I heard about Aunt Suzie being that voice, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy, because that was kind of like my friend through the show, so it was cool.
Yes, and oh look, Shishi LaRue joined us. I see. She joined in because she must have heard us talking about her, telling the story when she told us the story about Drake's. But yeah, but Paul Lynde, the Paul Lynde show. Paul Lynde was so gay, and what made us all want he could never do what he did in the '60s and play a father with a woman with a wife and two kids ever again. It wouldn't work here. It wouldn't work, but it worked back then because people were so naive to a point. The gay guys, we all knew he was a little fruitcake, but the straight people, there were so many women would throw themselves at Paul Lynde. And they're like, what do I do? Pretend they're a planner? It was a whole different place and time. I what did I call them? Those oh God. Those I actually used to do a song in the show, but we took it out because Neil Simon told me it didn't work. But it was called those ambiguous queens of '60s TV, and those were the gay men who were popular on television in the '60s, in the '60s and '70s. It was oh my God, there was Paul Lynde,
Charles
Riley,
Paul Lynde,
George Firth, Jim Nabors. Jim Nabors was Gomer Pyle. Cesar Romero, who was the Joker in Batman, on television, not the one, the movies. But I mean, these were men who were, that you knew they were gay, but they never talked about it because it would ruin their careers. But Paul Lynde, this voice, he didn't care. I mean, he never had, he walked around in caftans. He'd ride up and down Santa Monica Boulevard in his Bentley with his dog trying to pick up guys. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So, Ashlen, how we doing? You learning a lot today?
I'm learning a lot. I guess I have just like one question that is more like future than past, but if you both had to give advice to LGBTQ youth who are still struggling either with their parents or where they live, because some rural places still aren't as up to par, what kind of advice would you give those kids who are struggling with their identity still?
Frank, I'll let you go first.
If you're struggling with your identity, you already know there's something going on. You need to find out about yourself, but you can't in a rural town, and you can't in an area that's not friendly. There's the internet. Use it. And trust yourself. As time goes by, the more you learn, the better it will get. The more you understand about yourself, the better it will get. And I think, that crazy thing that worked around for a long time, it's still true. It gets better.
It does.
And there's no other way to describe it, but you have to do something to help make it better.
I agree with Frank on that.
That doesn't mean come out. Yeah, that doesn't mean come out to your parents. It doesn't mean come out to your pastor. It means you'll know what to do because you know your situation and the circumstance that you're in. You know exactly where the bad stuff is. But realize something. The bad stuff isn't you. It's them.
You are 100% right. And I feel the same. I was very lucky growing. I mean, I was lucky in certain respects. I lost my family when I was 6, but I never had to come out to anybody. I never had a mom, dad, or anybody like that to come out to. And that's why, as I said earlier in the broadcast, that I made that decision to come out and live my life as a free gay man. I just said, this is how I'm going to go because it's nothing different. And I've always lived my life that way. But my advice to the kids are just follow your heart. If you live in a terrible town with bigots and whatever, save that money. Save the money up and get a bus ticket out. Get to a larger city. There are other friends. And what Frank said, the internet is a way to meet other kids that are going through what you're going through. Yeah, you gotta sift through the bullshit because there's assholes and perverts and pedophiles out there. But there's a way you can actually use the internet that we didn't have to meet other people, the chat rooms, the whatever. You can meet other people. And, there are support groups out there. There are LGBTQ support groups for young kids. Just look it up. Look it up. It's there. Anyway,
And if you've got really bad Bible thumping parents and you're using a computer, there's something else you need to do.
what's
It's
that?
called erasing your search.
Correct. Because there's still people like Pence, Vice President, I just call him Pence, that still believe in that whole, we can de-gay that person. We can go and have therapy, which certain
It
states
didn't work well for him, did it?
No, it didn't. But I mean, it's still going on. How much fun this was. How much fun this was. And it was almost therapeutic for me, Ashlen. Thank you so much for coming up with an idea to do a show like this. We had a lot of people tuning in today, which is pretty cool. Frank?
Well, Ashlen, for both of you guys, there's something, after listening to all this, there's something that I think you may want to do.
What's that?
With Aunt Suzie and with the stores. Maybe what you should do is create an online, just an online site, which is the Gay Porn Stars Hall of Fame.
Ashlen knows the people.
That would be fun.
I haven't seen it.
Right?
And you got one of the best directors in the industry listening in right now.
Shishi
That'd
LaRue.
be a good person to.
Well, Shishi and I are going to
if
do
you do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. If you do it, first two people in are going to be Jack Wrangler and Kip Knoll.
Wow. The Gay Porn Hall of Fame. That would be, we could actually do the Straight Porn Hall of Fame too. Linda Lovelace and all that, Deep Throat. Nobody's done that. Frank, thank you so much. And you will be back. I think you will be back. We're going to do more of these this month. We've got Jason Stewart's joining us. Coco Peru's going to join us this month. David Dakota is going to join us this month. It's just going to be
Buck Angel.
Huh? Buck Angel is joining. Buck Angel's joining us this month. So,
and by the way, Ashlen, something very quick. You have to ask Michael about what I told him to go to a site that he had never heard of before that actually made him blush.
We'll talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
It was a site called jockpussy.com.
Yes.
I died. I actually spit my drink, Ashlen. I was like, what the hell?
And these are trans women turned to men, and some of them are hot as hell.
Gorgeous. I'm sitting there going, holy mackerel. I had to get myself a double iced tea and add ice cubes to it. Anyway,
you'll have to listen in to our Buck Angel interview then,
right?
Because we'll be talking more about that kind of stuff in that interview.
Anyway, what a fabulous show today! This was great. I had so much fun. Frank, once again, thank you. Ashlen, thank you for the idea of doing this. And
thank you guys so much. I just want to say thank you, from a younger generation. I am bisexual, so I'm part of the community, and it means so much to me to, learn from my elders and, carry on those traditions that you guys have set the path for. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't speak for myself, but I can say thank you for that compliment. But as far as elders concerned, that would be Aunt Suzie.
You vicious sow. You are a vicious sow, Frank.
Of course. And I'm trying off right now. Okay. Don't forget to take your Prevagen. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Frank. Thank you. Ashlen, love you, my dear. We'll talk in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, honey.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.